Well, how are ya? Good morning. I'm getting ready to start editing a video I made. Well, I didn't make it yet, but a video that I captured a while back, right before school started. I had my kids out and about, and we stumbled upon George Washington's old mill and distillery. So I haven't really had time to sit down and really edit it, so I hope you guys like it. I found it very, very interesting looking at the old engineering that went on and how they, just the mechanisms, and it's pretty interesting to me. I like that kind of stuff. So I hope you guys like it. Sit back and enjoy.
It is navigable by boat right up to the mill, even today. That water access is crucial. In the 18th century, there were not a lot of reliable roads in Virginia. Most bulk commodities were going by water. So with that water access, Washington could put his flour onto boats. It can be brought into the river, into the Chesapeake Bay, into the Atlantic Ocean, and then to wherever Washington could get the best price. Flour is going to cities like Norfolk, Philadelphia, it's going to Jamaica and the Caribbean. It's even going across the Atlantic to Europe, Spain, Italy, Portugal. The mill opens in 1771. Peak of operations producing about 5,000 to 8,000 pounds of flour, 2,000 to 3,000 pounds of cornmeal a day. It's a fair sight more productive than the bushel an hour, that earlier mill that this replaced. Made Washington a lot of money throughout his day. One of the big moneymaker businesses here at the Mount Vernon estate. Now, December 14th, 1799, General Washington passes away. This land, the grist mill business, gets left to his nephew, Lawrence Lewis. He also inherits the distillery, but I'll let my colleagues down there tell you all about that. Lawrence Lewis, suffice it to say, was no General Washington when it came to business and didn't take very good care of the mill. By the middle of the 19th century, the mill had been allowed to fall into such a state of disrepair, later owners made the decision to pull down the original structure. This is a reconstruction built on the foundations of the original mill. They purchased the insides of an old 19th century grist mill from the Shenandoah Valley, same kinds of stones as were in Washington's mill, and set it up inside. They opened for Washington's 200th birthday in the 1930s. But for many years, nothing ran. It wasn't until Mount Vernon took over in the 1990s that we brought it back into working order. In 2002, after a 7-year restoration, we reopened as a working water-powered grist mill. We've been a working mill ever since. We're going to take you on inside, we're going to tell you how the mill works and show it to you in operation. But before we do you have any questions about the history of the mill? Answered it. All right, it's going. For 50 points, you can guess which stones we're going to be running today. These ones, yes. Yeah, we've had some maintenance issues with this. One of the bearings, the bearing that this spindle rests on, needs to be replaced. So these cornstones are out of commission for the moment. But because this is the area of the mill where you will find our millstones, it's known as the stone floor. They're resting on top of a wooden table here called the Hurst frame. And the point of this table is to isolate the vibrations of the millstone. We don't want those vibrations transmitted into the masonry walls where it could cause the mortar to crack and to crumble. Well, we've got two pairs of millstones here. These ones that have been taken apart, and there's some maintenance work going on, these are called country stones. They're made out of a locally quarried granite. They weigh 1,200 pounds each. And they are used for grinding in Washington's day grains like barley, rye, oat, buckwheat, but most importantly, the staple crop here, corn. Everyone is eating cornmeal. Every single one of the 316 enslaved workers gets a weekly ration of cornmeal. And all the way up to General Washington, who for breakfast every morning has 3 cornmeal pancakes called hoe cakes, smothered in butter and honey. So this side of the mill is really going to be feeding Washington's table. Meanwhile, this side of the mill is feeding Washington's pocketbook. These are called French burr stones. They're made out of a freshwater quartz that was quarried outside of Paris, France, in the Marne River Valley. Washington purchases them at considerable expense because that very hard, dense stone, about 2,700 pounds each for these stones, are used to grind wheat into the finest flour available in the 18th century. called superfine flour. It's like today's cake and pastry flour, and it sells for a premium on the market. That's what Washington wants to sell. That's how he's going to be making his money. So this side of the mill is feeding the business here side of things. We'll send a steady flow of wheat in between the two stones. Now it's actually kind of nice that these have been taken apart because you can get a good look at how these stones work. There's a pair of them. There's a top stone called the runner stone and a bottom stone called the bed stone. Now you'll notice that there are patterns of grooves or furrows carved into both the faces of the runner stone and the bed stone. And they're carved in such a way that as those furrows pass over one another when that runner stone turns, they act like pairs of stone scissors cutting open the grain. The grain will be cut between two of those crossing furrows, be pushed over the flat face of the stone to the next furrow over, where it will be cut again and again and again. That's how you mill grain. We talk about things being stone ground. It's a bit of a misnomer because we're not crushing or pulverizing here. Instead, it is the shearing action. At no point do we want these stones to touch while moving under load. For reasons that should be obvious to anybody who's ever done this on a cold winter day. What happens to your hands when you rub them together like this? What happens to the temperature? They get warmer. You know what that force is called?
Friction.
Friction. Friction when milling is a bad thing. First thing you'll notice is the burning smell. With the corn, it's like burnt microwave popcorn. For the wheat, for those old enough to remember cap guns, it smells a bit like the smoke from an old cap gun. At that point, if you don't do anything, your day's going to go downhill pretty quickly. If you let that heat build, you begin to flake off bits of rock and sand into your meal that you can't sift out. It's called millstone grit. It's not very pleasant. But at the end of the day, that heat can build so intense it can burn the stones themselves. And if that happens, you need a new pair of millstones. They're supposed to last 100 to 150 years if cared for correctly. Ours are just shy of 200 years old. You don't want to be the miller explaining to General Washington he needs new millstones. So you control the height of the runner stone very carefully. And you control it by means of a lever you'll see downstairs called the lighter staff. It's a compound lever that raises and lowers the runner stone. So when the miller gets this mill going, the first thing he's going to do is pull down on that lighter staff to gap the stone. Raising up that runner stone is a little bit like taking off the parking brake in your car. The mill will begin to turn a little bit on its own. Not fast enough for what we need though. So the miller's going to come over here, he's going to hit the gas. Pulling down on the water staff is going to open a trapdoor gate in the flume. That'll allow water to pour into our water wheel. Water's hitting that wheel at about 10 o'clock, exiting at 6. When that wheel will be turning, 1,000 pounds of water will be driving our mill. Now that mill wheel is turning, the millstones are going to be turning. Now the miller is going to come back over to the lighter staff and very, very slowly lower the runner stone over top of the bed stone. He's aiming for a gap between those stones the thickness of a dime. You notice he can't see it. He's going to use his other senses to determine that gap. He's going to be feeling the flour coming out. If it's too coarse, there's too much bran, he knows to lower the stone. He starts to smell that burning smell indicating the grain is being scorched. He knows to raise the stone. But assuming that gap is precise, the wheat is milled into flour, it makes its way to the outside edge of the stone, and then to a hole in the floor just like this, where it goes down a chute to the lower level, where that flour will be collected. Now, are there any questions about the operation of the mill? Up here for a few seconds, but then once you've seen the wheat falling in between the stones, pretty well seem to show from up top. While it's running, head down the steps behind you down to the gear floor. There you can see the wooden gearing transferring the power from the wheel to the millstone. I can get around the corner and get up close and personal with that water wheel. Once the miller has shut down the mill, he'll tell you a little bit more about the operations downstairs, and then he'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have downstairs. All right, Eric, we're all set.
all.
Lifting up on that 5-pound counterweight, what I have now done is just gently lowered the runner stone back atop the bed stone, stopping the mill, if you will. Now you have behind me here, you've got a series of gears or wheels. This large one is called the grater face. That turns in unison with the water wheel. The smallest gear is what turns that iron spindle. Atop that iron spindle is where the runner stone is placed, rests. So that is what is turning that top stone. All powered by water. Hopefully all of you had a chance to see that pretty impressive looking water wheel around to the side. Think of a 2-story house. That's the size of that wheel. It's a 16-foot water wheel.
What did they use for bearings?
They would have iron.
They were iron bearings?
Yes. There are bearings on the central shaft here, as well as on the 2 shafts that turn the gear for each of the corn and the wheat stones. Now they
just have wood running in the iron bearing?
Wood is surrounding the iron bearings.
Yeah.
It's an iron, yes. Under that block there's an iron bearing. Now the cogs or the rounds, the teeth, if you will, on the gears, we wax them every morning, just as would be the case in Washington State. We would be using beeswax sometime. During the year, you could also use tallow. Part of the morning maintenance that you would do prior to your run. Now, as James pointed out, today we're obviously starting and stopping for demonstration purposes. In Washington State, certainly not the case. He's got a full race. The grain is here. He could have a 10-hour run, 10 hours straight, which would produce anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 pounds of metal.
What powered the elevator? This elevator?
The water wheel.
Oh, it powered the water well?
The water wheel. That vertical shaft that you see is going to transfer power to the top 2 floors, so you have a series of pulleys that will operate the elevator and the other devices. Everything here is powered by that 16-foot wheel.
In the old days, was this the only way up and down, or was the staircase here?
This would have been the quickest way to get up to the floor where the millstones are located. Now, folks, next up is the whiskey distillery. To get there, you need only follow this quick pathway out the back doorway. Thank you.
We were all smarter back then, I'll tell you.
Come on in. We'll begin the distillery tour in just a minute.
That is sunflower seeds.
No, I think that's wheat.
Then what is this? Is that more wheat? Yeah.
Corn. Oh, maybe one's barley. I'm sure she'll tell us.
Is that a butter turner?
There's no butter made here.
George Washington is in his final term in office as president in Philadelphia, and he is anxious to come home to have a nice, quiet, retired life from years and years of being in the public eye. But then he gets a letter from his farm manager, a man by the name of James Anderson. James Anderson was from Scotland. He was trained as a farm manager and had some experience in whiskey making in the process of his training. And so when he comes out here to Mount Vernon, he comes to Doe Run, where the grist mill is located, and sees an opportunity. He knows that using the extra amount of corn and rye being produced, as well as some barley, they can make whiskey. And so he writes to Washington with an idea of building a distillery just right where we're standing, near the grist mill for easy access. But Washington is not very excited about this idea. He doesn't know anything about the distillery. He doesn't want to go into any venture without knowing about it. And he's also worried about the kind of people that a distillery would attract, people he calls idlers. He's worried that they'll steal from him. So, at first he doesn't want to go to the distillery. But Anderson just wouldn't be deterred. And he eventually convinces Washington to let him have 2 copper stills in the cooperage near where the grist mill is located, where they're making barrels for the flour. And he makes about 600 gallons of whiskey, sells that in Alexandria, gets a profit of 83 pounds sterling, which is a pretty impressive amount for the amount that he had made, and tags on to his letter, "I cannot keep up with the demand." Well, now Washington's interested, but still needs some convincing. He writes to a friend by the name of John Fitzgerald, who's a rum distiller in Alexandria. And Fitzgerald writes to Washington and tells him, "Oh yes, I know of Anderson. He has an excellent reputation. The whiskey business is perfect." Now, Washington is convinced. He writes to Anderson, and he has returned home from the presidency. They break ground in October of 1797. They leave the 2 copper stills from cooperage, buy 3 more, buy a copper boiler in Bigelow Outback, and by February of 1798, they are ready to go. Now Anderson's a little bit busy with running farms, so his son John Anderson will be master distiller with an assistant by the name of Peter Bingle, and 6 young male slaves aged from 14 to 24 to do the heavy lifting. So, that first year in 1798, they put out about 4,500 gallons of whiskey. And then the next year, well over double that amount to close to 11,000 gallons of whiskey. Making Washington's distillery, as far as our records show, the largest running distillery in the new nation. Unfortunately, Washington passes away December 14, 1799. And in his will, Doe Run, where the grist mill and distillery are located, goes to his nephew Lawrence Lewis. And Lawrence Lewis, well, he's just not Washington, not a very good business manager. He and the Andersons don't get along at all. They leave in 1804, and without their guidance, 1808 is the last sale of whiskey. And then, to add on to the tragedy, 1814, the distillery burns to the ground. But then, fast forward to the 1990s, the Boundary Land Association has taken over from the state. And in 1999, they begin an archaeological dig here at the distillery site. They find 3 different floor types, scorch marks of where all 5 copper stills are located, where the copper boiler was located, and the well out back. Based on their information, 2005, they begin to reconstruct the distillery. And then, once the distillery has been built, they have an idea. We have a working grist mill. We know the recipe that Anderson devised: 60% rye, 35% corn, 5% malt barley. We grind that up in our grist mill pretty easily. We have the distillery with all the working equipment. Why aren't we making whiskey? Couldn't think of a reason why not. So, starting in 2009, we distill whiskey twice a year in March and November. Now, y'all have any questions? I know that was quite a bit of information. Who made our stills currently? It was Copper Smith from Louisville, Kentucky. Washington probably would have gotten his from Copper Smith closer in Alexandria. Any other questions?
Do you have any percent?
Yes, we do have whiskey for sale up in the gift shop on this site and then up near the mansion house.
Do you have any free samples?
Unfortunately, no. If Washington would not give idlers free samples, he would certainly be upset with us if we tried. He would come back from the grave.
Why'd you ask that?
No, the aging
I wanna
really
try it for
doesn't
free.
come into play until the 1930s.
What can you make now is it age?
We do half and half, unaged. Alright, before we go on, I will tell you how we make it. Alright, so, like I told you, it's 60% rye, 35% corn, 5% milk sauce. So, we measure out all our ingredients. We pour in boiling hot water into the mash tubs that we have over there, mix in all the grain ingredients. And then as it gets mixed in, it becomes a very thick starch. Once the malt barley has been added in, it'll break down my fermentor into sugar. Then once that's cooled down a little bit, we add in yeast. Yeast breaks down the sugar and turns it into alcoholic carbon dioxide. Once that's happened, that takes about 3 to 5 days. We'll fill all 5 copper stills with the mixture, light fire underneath. The alcohol will evaporate, travel up to the top of the stills, go down into a copper tube that is located in these barrels where water will be pouring down, cooling off these cooling down the copper tubes. The alcohol will come out the back. The first run is a very low alcohol content called low wine, only about 40%. Once that's all been collected, the stills will be cleaned out. The alcohol will be placed back in, go through another distillation process, 60 cents a gallon. So everything I just told you is what we do every March and November. Everyone you've met on this site today has done the whiskey run. And any other questions?
Is it still 60 cents a gallon?
You gotta talk to Virginia representatives about that one. Alright, well there is a gallery upstairs, it's self-guided. If you have the time, there is a video with a man portraying James Anderson. Then the first bottle of whiskey we ever made in 2009. 2 bedrooms belong to John Anderson and Peter Bingle, and then downstairs will be a manager's office with a ledger that will tell you who you'll find in Washington. The stairs to the upstairs are just beyond that partition, and it's air conditioned.
Let's go. This is cool.
That's all they.
Can you look at the rooms? Wait, Daddy, look at this.
That's the corn, isn't it?
Stop. Look at the little kid with the cat right there. Do you see the cat?
Much bigger than the one we saw. This thing is 2 stories tall. The only saw right here is small. Years, there's just a year. This is a
It's funny. The Washington Pepper Society campaign nationwide to convince alcoholics to take a blood fast. Check it out. I got trouble with it back there too. Say A, I guess, right? Back then?
Just started.
Over here.
I like the other one better because there was a feather pen. No, there's a feather pen up down there. There was a feather pen and I really liked it.
What, that room over here?
In here. This one has a good candle. Can I get in there?
No, that's why they have a rope there.
I know. I want to
Where's
bend
the feather
like
pin
that.
at?
Right there.
Oh yeah.
I want one. I want to bend like that, just blue.
Is that what it's actually called? We'll have to Google that later.
It's called a quill. No, it's not.
Quill?
No, it's not.
It's not a feather pin.
No. How do they make it look so old?
Very cool.